since I'm all heated up here, I figured that I should get into a bit of a heated rant here. I'll try not to get too heated, you know what I mean? But I wanted to talk about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows, as that up there might indicate. Most of you by now probably know that I write for TeenageMutantNinjaTurtles.com, and I have been writing for that website for about 5 years now. So I have written a lot about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles over the past 5 years, and that has required me to do a lot of research on the subject. I have experience in this with this particular subject, you know what I mean? So, I feel like I have certain things to say about this that other people might not think about because they might not be as experienced with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So I felt like I would do, I've already done my review and you can read my review on the website, but I felt like I wanted to do a little bit of a defense of the movie as well, because I've seen a lot of people hating on it. I've seen a lot of negative reviews and a lot of people just not understanding at all what this movie was trying to do, which baffles me to no end. It is completely and utterly baffling, because I don't see how it could be any more clear what they were trying to do with this movie. If you haven't figured out yet that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows is a almost 100% direct reference to the 1987 original animated cartoon of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, then you're stupid. Or you never watched that iteration of the Ninja Turtles. One or the other. That you have two options, and likely both of those options are true for you if that's the case. A lot of the complaints I've been hearing have been so stupid. One of the main complaints I've heard is, well, Shredder doesn't really do too much in this, and I feel like Shredder's a more imposing, threatening character, and he's definitely smarter and more of a threatening person and threatening villain than they portrayed him in this movie. Alright, so you remember how I mentioned that this movie is, in many ways, a direct fucking reference to the original animated series, right? I want you to really try to remember what Shredder was actually like in the original cartoons. Because he was a goddamn goofball. He was a freaking bumbling buffoon, continually making mistakes. He was the quintessential villain in a 1980s animated series. He was Dr. Claw. I'll get you, Turtles, next time! I believe he actually said that a few times, in fact. And by a few, I mean probably hundreds of times. But that kind of gets beyond my point of what I'm trying to make here. The point I'm trying to make here is that he has never been, in that particular iteration of the Ninja Turtles, he has never been an imposing figure. He has never been a threatening figure. He has very rarely ever been able to get the one-up on the Turtles, and even when he is able to do that, he always gets skunked in the end. Because that's the kind of villain he is. He's the villain that always gets skunked in the end. So, if you see that kind of a villain in this movie from Shredder, which I will say right now, for those who don't want spoilers, you might want to stop watching. But if you see that kind of character in Shredder in this movie, there's a fucking reason for that. And you do see that kind of Shredder in this movie. So when people complain that Shredder wasn't Shredder enough in this movie, I'm just like, what Shredder are you referring to? Are you referring to the Shredder that was in the original comic book series, who actually managed to come back a few times and be something of a threatening or imposing character? Or are you referring to the Shredder in the most recent Nickelodeon series that actually is kind of like a dangerous threat and can actually cause some real freaking problems for the Ninja Turtles? Or are you referring to the one that this particular movie is referring to, which is a direct reference to the 1987 animated series where Shredder's a goddamn goober? They respected the original source material. They respected the source material that they were working with, and the source material they were working with was the original animated series. Now, you don't have to like that they decided to use that source material more so than any other source material, but I think you do kind of have to accept it, and you do kind of have to appreciate, at least in some small way, that they did a very good job of recreating what these characters were actually like in that particular iteration of the Ninja Turtles. They didn't fuck that up. They did exactly what they set out to do, and they did a really good job of it. This was literally the animated series from 1987 come to life on the big screen. And that is what a lot of Ninja Turtles fans have been really wanting to see. So when you act like that's a huge problem with it, I'm just, what are you fucking talking about? Aren't you the same person who, after the first movie came out, you're complaining, where's Krang, where's Bebop, where's Rocksteady? And why didn't they put this in from my favorite animated series back in 1987? That was one of the main complaints with the 2014 movie, is that it wasn't doing enough to recreate what most audiences were familiar with from the 1987 cartoon. And believe you me, that is the iteration of the Ninja Turtles that most audiences in the world are familiar with. So when you're complaining that they did too much to cater to the majority audience, and they did a really good job of catering to the majority audience, I feel like you're not being realistic, you're not being fair, you're not being just in your judgment of the film. You're just saying, well, it wasn't precisely what I particularly wanted, and you're calling it shit based on that. That's not a realistic rating. That's not a realistic criticism. You can't criticize something by saying, well, I personally didn't like it because it didn't meet my particular specific expectations for this particular specific movie. I wanted it to go into this direction, and because it didn't go in this direction, it wasn't good. Shut up. Just shut up. You're an idiot. You're a moron. Gotta cool off again. Gotta cool off. Getting a little heated. Gotta cool off. Alright. Maybe I should employ the squirt bottle more frequently, even in the dead of winter when I'm getting into rant mode, you know what I mean? Gotta cool off. But, yeah, I mean, it was just really frustrating to see those kind of comments about this movie, because ultimately I feel like this is the closest that a movie has ever gotten to respecting as much of the particular source material that they were using as possible. They got Bebop and Rocksteady perfectly correct. They looked exactly like they did back in the original animated series. They got Krang pretty goddamn good too. A lot of people were worried about what Krang was going to look like. A lot of people were thinking he was going to look like a piece of shit, right? They actually managed to make Krang look like Krang. And Krang acted like Krang. Personally, I prefer the Krang from the original comic books, and I like the Krang from the new Nickelodeon series as well, because it's, you know, a little bit more based in that original comic book series, more or less. Like, obviously, they took a lot of inspiration for Krang in the new Nickelodeon series from several different iterations of the characters and whatnot. The Utrom, I will say, not the Krang, but the Utrom in this case. But that being said, I feel like for what they were trying to do with this movie, recreate the Krang from the 1987 series, they did a pretty good job. I would have preferred to hear what Krang sounded like with Fred Armisen in the role, because I feel like he might have been able to pull off more of a style of Krang voice that we would be more familiar with as fans of the original 87 cartoon. But Brad Garrett didn't do a terrible job. He did a pretty good job. It wasn't exactly what I would have expected from Krang, but he still managed to have a few kind of like Weasley burp almost like burp-like noises in there, which made it feel a little bit more like Krang. And, you know, in terms of acting like Krang and in terms of like the lines that he has and the actions that he takes in the film, he feels like Krang. He is Krang on the big screen, and that is something that a lot of fans have been dying to see for years. You'll go and listen to AVGN, right? Angry Video Game Nerd has talked about this in the past, and he said that when he was a kid, they would sometimes talk about the Ninja Turtles movie sequels and say, oh, I wonder if they're going to put Krang in this one. I wonder if they're going to put Krang in this one. That hit me right in the nostalgia as well, because I remember a lot of my friends and even a lot of my brother's older friends saying a lot of the same things, like, I wonder when they're going to put Krang in one of these movies, right? Well, they finally put Krang in one of these movies, and everyone's shitting on it, even though they got Krang pretty goddamn well. They got him, they did him pretty well, you know what I mean? I don't get it. Even the Technodrome looks pretty damn cool to me. I mean, it's an updated version of the Technodrome, but if you think about what the Technodrome originally was back in the 87 series, it's like, it was goofy as hell. It was a freaking orb with an eyeball on the top. It's goofy as hell in this as well. And I might add, by the way, that was purely a concept of the cartoon. That came from the cartoon. So you can't even say, well, it's not the Technodrome that I remember. Actually, it is. It's modeled directly after the model of the Technodrome that was first created back in the 80s. So you can't really say, it's not the Technodrome I remember. Yes, it is. You're wrong. You're misremembering things. And really, that gets at the heart of my complaint of others' complaints about this movie. I feel like a lot of people who are complaining about Shredder, complaining about Krang, complaining that the movie doesn't make any sense, are viewing Ninja Turtles through rose-colored glasses. Through those nostalgic glasses that tell you that you're right about everything that happened in your childhood, and that your childhood was so perfect and pristine and there was nothing wrong with it at all. So clearly the Ninja Turtles were really as cool as you remember them to be. And I will say this, as somebody who writes for TeenageMutantNinjaTurtles.com, I still think the Ninja Turtles are pretty fucking cool. But you shouldn't try to view these things through rose-colored glasses, alright? If you really want to get the most out of this movie, do yourself a favor and watch maybe, I would say, at least the first season of the original animated series. It won't take you long. It's like a 3-hour excursion, I think. And then there's 6 episodes, 5 or 6 episodes or something like that. And then if you really feel like going further than that, you can plop in a few extra episodes of like the second season, right? To give you a sense of what the Ninja Turtles were really like back then. And once you get that sense of what the Ninja Turtles were really like, not what your nostalgia is telling you, not what you think you remember with rose-colored glasses, but what they were actually like, and then you take that understanding of what they were actually like, and you compare it to what you're seeing on the big screen now, I think you will be amazed. I will go so far as to say that this is the most accurate representation of any nostalgic property that I've ever seen on the big screen. This has to be the most accurate representation of the particular source material that they were working with that has ever been brought to the cinema. And people are shitting on it for all the wrong reasons. And it drives me nuts because this movie is so much, not just for those reasons, but it's just so much better than the first 2014 movie. And there were so many good reasons not to like that movie. And there are so few reasons not to like this movie. It's dumb, stupid fun, just like the original animated series was dumb, stupid fun. So if you're really going to get upset about that, you're really going to complain that it didn't get as perfect as you think you remember it used to be, then please do your freaking homework first. Please, instead of just relying on your shitty memory, go back and actually watch some of these episodes and try to remember what they were actually like. Because they were goofy as all hell. They were filled with horrible puns. So, and jokes. So when you get into this movie and they have some pretty big groaners in there, and you complain that the jokes are stupid and childish, and I'm like, well, yeah, it's based on the original animated series. And don't get me wrong, there are certain aspects of this movie that are not directly referencing the original animated series, particularly Brittany Abishi, I think is her name, as Karai, and then they have Stephen Amell as Casey Jones. I felt like they both did a pretty damn good job in their roles, but they didn't really give Karai much of a speaking role. I don't know if she had any lines at all. I don't recall her having any lines. She might have had one or two, but it was like she basically just stood there and didn't do much of anything. And I will grant you this: Karai, at least in the new Nickelodeon series, is very much at first she's very much a character that responds to Shredder and just does whatever Shredder tells her to do. And she's like the second in command. She's like, that kind of chubby guy in the original 1990 movie that always followed Shredder around and did his bidding for him. That chubby guy should have been Karai, because that's who Karai is. You know what I mean? That's, at first at least, that's who she is. And that character changes over time, but at first, I will grant you that she's, at least in certain iterations, has been kind of a quiet character, kind of just a, no nonsense, follow orders kind of character. So I give you that okay, it's kind of hard to get that character perfect, and unless you're going to devote enough screen time to actually give her some kind of characterization, that's probably what you should fall back on. But a lot of people who watched the original animated series and are going into this thinking that it's based on the animated series, which it is, they're going to see Karai and think, well, who is Karai? Because a lot of them won't remember Karai from anything in their past. And then they're going to see Stephen Amell as Casey Jones, and they're going to say, well, that's not like the Casey Jones that I remember from the animated series. And to that much, I will say that's true. He's not exactly like he was in the animated series. But I think that's almost kind of a good thing, because he kind of has more depth than he did in the animated series. Casey Jones, I felt like, didn't have a lot of depth in the original animated series, but he had a lot of depth in the comics, and he's had a lot of depth in certain iterations and like cartoons, and even in the movie he had a little bit more depth in the original movies, right? So I actually like that they took the approach of giving him a slightly new, slightly different background in this particular movie that actually does fit pretty well with what we know about Casey Jones as a character overall. So, yes, it's not what you might remember from the original animated series, and that's one area where they didn't perfectly replicate the original animated series, but I'm actually glad that they didn't, because Casey Jones in the original animated series is kind of I won't say he's a dull character, but he can be somewhat a dull character. He just, it seems like he randomly appears in episodes for no other reason than this is going to be a Casey Jones episode, And I feel like we don't really get to see much of his character or his characterization in that cartoon. So I kind of like that they did that. And I guess I can understand from that perspective, if they're going to go to the trouble of giving Casey Jones a characterization that doesn't fall in line with the original animated series, then why wouldn't they do that with the Shredder? But I didn't have a problem with that, because it fell in line with it's really important. Shredder is important to the. He's as important to as Krang to getting the flavor of the original animated series, at least the first 5 or 6 episodes, down pat. Because Shredder is a part of all that. He's a part of his seemingly stupid actions that are entirely based on his own ego and stuff like that. That is entirely in line with what we see in the original animated series, and it works for the story that they're trying to recreate on this film, because he needs to be that kind of character so that we can then see Krang. So, at least in the way that they wanted to show Krang by bringing back the Technodrome. So I don't really fault them for that. I think they did what they had to do, and I felt like it really was cohesive. It worked really well. It's not the greatest movie of all time, alright? It's not ever going to be the greatest movie of all time. But it's dumb, stupid fun. And I can tell you one thing for sure. I did not buy the 2014 movie. I have no desire to buy that movie. I am going to buy Out of the Shadows. That's going in my collection. That movie was very good. So, I won't say it's excellent. I'm not going to say it's like one of the best movies of all time, obviously, because there are much more important films out there than this. This is a stupid Hollywood blockbuster, alright? And if you're okay with stupid Hollywood blockbusters simply being the stupid Hollywood blockbusters they should be, and not trying too hard to go into new territories where they can fuck everything up, then I don't see why you wouldn't like this movie. I don't understand why you wouldn't like this movie. It doesn't make sense not to like this movie. It doesn't make sense to me, because I feel like they gave the fans exactly what the fans requested. The fans wanted to see Baxter Stockman. They put Baxter Stockman in there. The fans wanted Bebop and Rocksteady. They put Bebop and Rocksteady in there. The fans wanted Casey Jones. They put Casey Jones in there. The fans wanted Shredder to be in there, but without all the fucking armor that made him look like a transformer. He's in there, and he doesn't have as much stupid freaking armor. The fans wanted Krang. They got Krang. Everything that the fans wanted, they put into this movie. This movie is pure fan service. And yet the fans are still bitching, whining, and moaning. And that's something I'm going to get into in the next video, because that's a completely, that's a whole other discussion that I want to have about nerd rage culture in modern day cinema and in modern day geekdom, I guess, So yeah, those are my thoughts on Out of the Shadows. Please let me know what you thought of the movie if you've seen it below. Please let me know if you're interested in seeing the movie. If anything I've said has sparked any interest, please let me know. I would love to hear that. Please do check out my review if you are at all interested on TeenageMutantNinjaTurtles.com. Other than that, I will talk to you guys later. Thanks for watching. Catch you later. Peace.